When people finally understand why something is difficult, they expect relief. Clarity feels like progress, so it seems reasonable to assume that effort should decrease once things make sense. But very often, effort doesn't feel lighter, it feels heavier. This creates confusion. People assume understanding was supposed to unlock action, not increase resistance. When that doesn't happen, they conclude something is wrong. Either the explanation wasn't correct, or they themselves are failing to apply it. But clarity does not reduce effort immediately. What it does is remove uncertainty, and uncertainty, while uncomfortable, often cushions effort. Once uncertainty disappears, effort becomes fully visible. You feel it directly without distraction or confusion. That exposure can feel overwhelming. Nothing has failed. The system is simply adjusting to a new level of awareness. Awareness changes perception before it changes behavior. That gap is where effort often feels most intense. Before clarity, effort exists in the background. You know something is hard, but you don't know precisely why. After clarity, effort becomes specific. You can see the hesitation points. You notice the internal resistance. You feel the cost of choosing differently. This doesn't mean effort increased. It means perception sharpened. Awareness amplifies sensation. The task didn't change, but your relationship to it did. Effort feels heavier because it's no longer abstract. It's defined. This stage often feels discouraging because people mistake heightened perception for increased difficulty. In reality, this is the first stage of honest engagement. The system is no longer avoiding friction. It's acknowledging it. That acknowledgement feels uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Without it, adaptation can't begin. Increased perceived effort is not a setback. It's a signal that the system is fully engaged with the change process. Confusion has an unrecognized function. It protects self-image. When things don't make sense, resistance feels external, situational, uncontrollable. But once clarity arrives, resistance feels internal, personal. This shift can feel threatening. There's no longer ambiguity to hide behind. When effort feels heavy, it now feels like a reflection of you. This is why people sometimes unconsciously resist understanding. Confusion softens responsibility. Clarity sharpens it. That sharpening isn't moral judgment, it's precision. Precision removes excuses, but it also removes false blame. In the early stages, however, clarity often feels harsher than confusion. Not because it is, but because it removes emotional buffering. The system hasn't adapted yet, but perception has. That mismatch creates discomfort. Many people misinterpret this discomfort as regression when it is actually a transition into accuracy. Once you understand how your behavior works, effort feels intentional. Every delay feels chosen. Every hesitation feels deliberate. This creates pressure. Effort stops feeling neutral and starts feeling evaluative. People judge themselves for feeling resistance. But effort was never neutral to begin with. It only appeared that way when it was poorly understood. Insight removes ambiguity, not effort. When ambiguity disappears, effort feels exposed. That exposure creates self-consciousness. Self-conscious effort feels heavier than unconscious effort. Not because it requires more energy, but because it carries meaning. The mistake is believing that meaning reflects character. It doesn't. It reflects transition. The system is adjusting to operating with more information. Until behavior reorganizes around that information, effort remains conscious. Conscious effort always feels heavier than automatic effort. That heaviness is temporary. Many people assume effort reduces first, and progress follows. In reality, progress begins while effort is still high. Effort only decreases after repetition stabilizes behavior. Understanding does not remove effort. Familiarity does. But familiarity takes time. Between understanding and familiarity, effort often increases. This phase feels like failure because it contradicts expectations. People think insight should simplify things immediately. When it doesn't, they abandon the explanation or themselves. But nothing is broken. The system is learning. Learning always increases cognitive load before it reduces it. Early effort spikes because the system is reorganizing how it responds. That reorganization requires attention, monitoring, and correction. All of that feels heavy. This heaviness is not evidence that understanding was useless. It's evidence that understanding has begun to interact with behavior. Insight is fast because it's cognitive. Integration is slow because it's behavioral. Behavior changes through repetition, not realization. This difference in speed creates frustration. People expect behavior to align immediately with what they know. When it doesn't, they feel stuck. But the system doesn't operate on logic alone. It operates on familiarity and safety. New patterns must be tested repeatedly before they're trusted. Until trust forms, effort remains high. This is why integration feels slow, even when understanding feels complete. The system isn't resisting change, it's evaluating it. Evaluation takes time. Rushing this process interrupts it. Integration cannot be forced without increasing resistance. Time is not wasted here. It is required. After understanding, the system enters an exposure phase. Resistance becomes more noticeable. Effort feels more defined. This phase feels raw because it removes emotional numbness. People often interpret this as worsening, but it's actually increased accuracy. You're seeing what was always there. Before clarity, resistance was diffuse. After clarity, it's visible. This visibility creates discomfort. But discomfort is not danger. It's awareness without adaptation. Over time, adaptation catches up, but until then, exposure feels intense. Many people quit during this phase because they mistake honesty for harm. In reality, exposure is the doorway to change. Without it, behavior remains automatic and unexamined. Effort feels heaviest when vigilance is high. After understanding, the system becomes cautious. It monitors choices closely. It checks outcomes. It looks for threat. This vigilance increases effort temporarily. Once the system confirms safety through repetition, vigilance decreases. Effort then drops naturally. But until that confirmation occurs, effort feels heavy. This is not a sign to push harder. It's a sign to remain steady. Consistency without pressure allows vigilance to relax. Pressure prolongs it. This is why effort often feels most intense just before it becomes manageable. The system is on the verge of trust. Interfering at this stage delays relief. Staying calm allows it. When effort feels heavy, people often label it as resistance. They assume the system is refusing to cooperate. But heaviness and resistance are not the same thing. Resistance is avoidance. Heaviness is load. Load appears when the system is actively engaging with change. This distinction matters. If heaviness is misread as resistance, people respond by applying pressure. Pressure increases threat. Threat increases avoidance. The system then actually becomes resistant. What began as engagement turns into withdrawal. Heaviness should not be confronted. It should be tolerated. It signals that the system is working at capacity, not shutting down. Treating heaviness as failure creates the very resistance people fear. Understanding this difference prevents unnecessary escalation. The system doesn't need force. It needs space to adapt under manageable load. Pressure changes how effort is experienced. Under pressure, effort is no longer neutral. It becomes evaluative. Every attempt feels judged. Every pause feels unacceptable. This shifts the system into threat response. Threat responses prioritize safety over learning. When safety is prioritized, flexibility decreases, effort increases, progress slows. Pressure does not motivate the system, it alarms it. This is why people often feel less capable the harder they push. The push itself becomes the problem. Without pressure, effort can exist without urgency. With pressure, effort feels dangerous. Understanding this prevents a common mistake, assuming that discomfort means more force is required. Often the opposite is true. Reducing pressure allows effort to normalize. Normalized effort is sustainable. Pressurized effort is not. Consistency feels harder than intensity because it lacks emotional payoff. Intensity creates adrenaline. It feels meaningful. Consistency feels dull. But the system adapts to what is predictable, not what is dramatic. Intensity spikes effort and requires recovery. Consistency allows gradual adjustment. Early on, consistency feels heavier because it lacks novelty. The system has to stay engaged without stimulation. That engagement requires patience. Over time, however, consistency reduces effort because behavior becomes familiar. Familiar behavior requires less conscious control. This is why consistency eventually feels easier than intensity. The difficulty is that this benefit is delayed. Many people abandon consistency before it pays off. They mistake boredom for inefficiency. In reality, boredom often signals that behavior is becoming normal. Repetition is how effort decreases. Each repetition slightly reduces uncertainty. Reduced uncertainty lowers vigilance. Lower vigilance reduces effort. But this process is incremental. No single repetition produces relief. Relief emerges cumulatively. This is why effort feels unchanged for a long time. The reductions are too small to notice individually. People expect effort to drop suddenly. When it doesn't, they assume repetition isn't working. In reality, repetition is quietly doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's building familiarity. Familiarity doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself only when effort finally feels lighter. By then, the work has already been done. Effort reduction depends on trust. The system must trust that a new pattern is safe, reliable, and repeatable. Trust cannot be demanded. It must be demonstrated through experience. Rushing effort reduction sends the opposite signal. It suggests urgency and threat. This keeps vigilance high. Vigilance sustains effort. Trying to force ease delays it. Ease arrives when the system relaxes. Relaxation occurs when outcomes are predictable. Predictability takes time. This is not inefficiency, it's protection. The system is designed to avoid premature relaxation that could cause harm. Respecting this design allows effort to decline naturally. Clarity removes comforting explanations. You can no longer blame confusion, circumstances, or timing. You see exactly where effort is required. This honesty feels heavy, not because it's harsh, but because it's direct. Directness removes emotional distance. Emotional distance makes effort tolerable. When distance disappears, effort feels closer, more personal. This discomfort does not mean clarity was a mistake. It means clarity is being integrated. Over time, honesty reduces conflict, but initially, it increases awareness. Awareness is uncomfortable before it becomes stabilizing. Many people retreat from clarity at this stage, those who don't eventually experience relief. Effort doesn't vanish when change succeeds, it transforms. Early effort is conscious, deliberate, and monitored. Later effort becomes automatic, background, and quiet. Automatic effort feels lighter because it doesn't demand attention. The amount of energy may be similar, but the experience is different. This is why people underestimate how much effort remains in successful change. They confuse ease with absence. Ease is presence without friction. Understanding this prevents unrealistic expectations. The goal is not zero effort. It's unremarkable effort. At the beginning, change requires control. You monitor behavior closely. You intervene frequently. This control feels heavy. As familiarity develops, control becomes unnecessary. Behavior stabilizes. Effort becomes embedded. This transition takes time. During the transition, effort feels excessive. But excessive effort is often temporary. It reflects a system in the process of handing control over to habit. Once that handover completes, effort decreases sharply. Interfering during this phase slows the transfer. Allowing it completes it. Patience is often misunderstood as waiting without action. In this context, patience is restraint. It is the decision not to interfere while adaptation is underway. This restraint requires effort. It means tolerating discomfort without immediately trying to remove it. Most people struggle here because discomfort feels like something that should be fixed. But during integration, discomfort is informational. It signals that the system is adjusting. Interrupting that adjustment resets the process. Patience allows repetition to do its work. It doesn't accelerate change, but it prevents delay. Without patience, people continually restart adaptation, never allowing effort to stabilize. This is why patience supports progress even though it doesn't feel productive. It protects continuity. Continuity is what allows effort to decline. Immediate relief feels like success, but in many cases, early relief comes from avoidance, not integration. Avoidance removes effort by removing engagement. Integration removes effort by increasing familiarity. These two experiences feel similar at first, but their outcomes are different. Avoidance produces temporary comfort followed by stagnation. Integration produces temporary discomfort followed by stability. The system distinguishes between the two by monitoring repetition. Relief without repetition is unreliable. Relief after repetition is durable. This is why sustainable change often feels worse before it feels better. The absence of early relief does not mean failure. It often means the system is choosing the harder but safer path. Transitional discomfort is unavoidable when patterns change. It exists in the space between old familiarity and new stability. This discomfort feels purposeless because it doesn't immediately lead to reward. But it serves a function. It keeps attention engaged while new patterns are tested. Avoiding transitional discomfort interrupts learning. Tolerating it allows learning to complete. This tolerance is not endurance. It's acceptance. Acceptance reduces secondary resistance. Secondary resistance comes from fighting the discomfort itself. Removing that fight lowers overall effort. The discomfort remains, but it becomes manageable. Over time, it fades as familiarity increases. Effort reduction is rarely dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. One day, you simply notice that something feels less demanding than it used to. This quietness makes effort reduction easy to overlook. People expect a clear turning point. Instead, relief accumulates gradually. This is why tracking effort day to day is unreliable. The change is too subtle. Only reflection over longer periods reveals it. Quiet improvement is stable improvement. Loud improvement often collapses. The system prefers gradual change because it's less risky. Trust builds slowly. Once built, it doesn't require constant reinforcement. When effort feels heavy, people often try to force momentum. They increase demands, raise expectations, or apply deadlines. This creates urgency. Urgency signals threat. Threat increases vigilance. Vigilance increases effort. Momentum does not emerge from force. It emerges from reduced friction. Forcing momentum keeps friction high. The system responds by tightening control. Effort increases further. This creates a cycle that feels like trying harder without progress. The solution is not less effort, but less interference. Momentum appears once effort drops below a tolerable threshold. That drop happens naturally through stabilization, not pressure. Consistency works because it reduces uncertainty. Intensity increases uncertainty. Under intensity, outcomes vary. Under consistency, outcomes repeat. Repetition allows prediction. Prediction lowers vigilance. Lower vigilance reduces effort. This is why consistency eventually feels easier than intensity. But early on, consistency feels harder because it lacks stimulation. The system must stay engaged without excitement. This feels effortful at first. Over time, however, predictability becomes comforting. Effort declines because the system knows what to expect. Consistency transforms effort into routine. Routine feels light. Once effort stabilizes, it becomes background noise. You stop noticing it. This invisibility can be confusing. People forget how difficult things once felt. This leads them to underestimate the process. But invisibility is the sign of success. When effort no longer demands attention, behavior has integrated. The work didn't disappear. It became automatic. Automatic processes require less conscious control. That's why they feel effortless. This is not sudden change. It's the result of prolonged repetition without interference. Effort feels lighter when familiarity replaces vigilance. The system no longer monitors each action closely. It trusts the pattern. That trust allows relaxation. Relaxation reduces perceived load. This change does not come from motivation, discipline, or force. It comes from time spent repeating a behavior under stable conditions. Understanding initiates the process. Repetition builds it. Patience protects it. Effort lightens not because you tried harder, but because the system adapted. That adaptation is the real outcome.